Let's talk about the Dramatistic Pentad. This is a tool for describing arguments and describing argument situations. In this lecture, you can expect to discuss the background of Kenneth Burke, who is the author of this particular idea. We're also going to discuss the foundation of the Dramatistic Pentad and the concept of identification. We're going to explore an example using the Dramatistic Pentad. Okay, so these three things are what you can expect from this video. Here we go. So Kenneth Burke, he's that guy right there. Kenneth Burke, is his major contribution to rhetoric is this concept of dramatism. So he says that life is a drama. Not life is like a drama or it's kind of like a drama. He's like, life is a drama. So we should think about the way that people act as if they are acting within some sort of a stage. He said it's the same thing. Burke believed that language is a strategic human response to a specific situation. So what Burke really wants to be able to do is understand and convey to people what the situation was that language was used in order to better understand exactly what those choices were and what persuasion and what rhetoric was actually being used in those particular instances. He also believed that the individual who is analyzing the argument needs to figure out why a writer or speaker selected the words that were used in the message. So this is ultimately a task of assessing motives. And Burke is very interested in this. He believes this is one of these foundational things that you need to understand to be able to understand the argument is the motive for why this person was actually communicating in the way that they did and why it was that in that particular specific instance that they chose those specific words in order to try and make this particular communication attempt. He also said that persuasion is the communicator's attempt to get the audience to accept his or her view of reality as true. So this is the concept of identification. And identification is the common ground between the speaker and the audience. And Burke calls this common ground substance. So if you were to be talking to someone else, you and that person have certain things in common. Maybe you have a lot in common, maybe you have a little bit in common, but you have something in common probably. And whatever that thing is that's in common, Burke would call this the substance. Okay, and the more overlap of substance, the greater the identification. And if you identify with someone else, right? So going back to our previous slide here, if persuasion is trying to get the audience to accept that our view of reality is true, then we have lots of substance, right? If you believe and see the world the same way that I do, then it's going to be very easy to persuade you about things that I find to be true, right? Because if you see the world the same way, then you're also going to see issues in a very similar way. Okay, so that's why Burke is interested in this so much. The more overlap of substance, the greater the identification. And also there's this idea of like bringing this to the forefront too. So one of the things that arguers are trying to do, or people who are trying to make a persuasive attempt are trying to do, is to bring these ideas, these commonalities to the forefront to make it feel like we are having as much of this overlap of substance to increase identification to make those persuasive attempts. So the more identification, the more persuasion. The Dramatistic Pentad is a tool for describing arguments and really to describe scenes. Remember, Burke believes that the world is a stage. So what he wants to be able to do is to describe all of the actors, the background, the setting, all of that stuff. So the Dramatistic Pentad is a 5-pronged method that's a shorthand way to talk about the talk that's happening. Okay? And we're going to go through each of these one by one. There's 5 different prongs. Okay, so pentad, so pent meaning 5. First, we have the act. So this pictures and describes what was done. Okay, so this is the thing that was actually happening. And think about this in terms of theater, in terms of drama, right? You are describing the thing that's going on. This is the act. This is what's happening. The scene is the description of the environment and gives a context for where and when the act was performed. Okay, so you've got the act, so you've got the thing that's happening, and then where was it going on? You know, what time of day, what does it look like, all that kind of stuff. So this is the scene. And notice the parallel to theater and to drama here. The agent is the person or people who are doing the act. Then the agency is the means that the agent used to do the persuasion. Now this is different than the act. The act is kind of what's going on in the scene. The agency is how the agent is doing this particular act. And we'll show you this more in an example here in just a sec. The purpose is the speaker's purpose that's stated or implied goals of the communication. Okay, so this is the reason. Again, Burke is concerned with motives, right? So here we've got the purpose, and that kind of shows up here. So the stated or implied goals of the communication. So why are these people talking to each other? What's the intention here? What are the motives of this particular situation? Because that's going to influence it as well. It may be stated or it may also be implied. So again, going back to this, the act, it pictures and describes exactly what happened. The scene is sort of where and when, the description here. The agent is the person or people who are doing the act. Agency is the means that were used to do the persuasion, and the purpose is the speaker's purpose that was stated or implied for the goals of the communication. If you want an acronym for this, you can say ASAP, right? So you have to rearrange these a little bit from where they are on here, but if you wanted to have an acronym, then ASAP actually works to remember this pretty well. Cool. Here's an example. So I'm going to just describe a scene. Remember, this isn't giving you any sort of argumentation theory or saying this is done right or wrong. This is just a shorthand tool to describe what's going on and to give all of the key elements to be able to recount something that happened. So you're better able to describe it and better able to help convey this to understand the argument. So the act, a student talks with her counselor about transferring to USC. Okay, so this person walks in and talks to the counselor. The conversation is face-to-face in the office of the counselor at the Cardiff campus of Miracosta College. The counselor and the student have never met before this meeting, and it's 2018, and it's 11:30 a.m. Okay, so that's our scene. So notice the act is what's going on. The scene, this is where and how. Or sorry, not where, it's where and when. The agent is the counselor. So again, this is the person who's going to be doing the act that we're talking about here. In the agency, the counselor is presenting data to show the acceptance rates for similar GPAs to the student who came in. And the data shows the student would most likely not get in. Now, why would the counselor be doing this? The counselor wants to help the student gain a realistic assessment of her options so she doesn't waste her time and is not disappointed. Okay, so we have if you're looking at this, hopefully you get a good picture of what's going on. You have a counselor who is the agent, who is talking to a student in a counseling office on the Cardiff campus at Miracosta College, explaining using an analogy here. So the agency is actually an analogy showing analogous cases that would hopefully be similar to this particular student in order to show and justify and explain the argument. Okay, so this is a tool just to discuss a situation where communication is occurring and to better be able to convey what's happening in a communication situation. Okay, so we do have this concept of identification. So with those two individuals, this question for you to think about, what substance might that counselor have had in terms of overlap between the counselor and the person who came in talking about transferring? Okay, the more they have in common, the more they're able to have a shared worldview, the more likely that person is going to be able to be successful in this persuasive attempt. So just think about that. What commonalities, what shared worldview perspectives and experiences and things like that would they have in common? So again, the dramatistic pentad, the act pictures and describes what was done. The scene is the description that gives a context for where and when. The agent is the person or people doing it. The agency is how it happened. And the purpose is the stated or implied goals. So what we covered here was we discussed briefly a background of Kenneth Burke. There's definitely a lot more you can go into about Kenneth Burke. We discussed the foundations of the dramatistic pentad and also this concept of identification. And we also explored an example using the dramatistic pentad. Okay, so again, this is the dramatistic pentad. It's a tool for describing arguments, describing communication situations, so then you're able to convey them pretty accurately back to other people and also for yourself for unpacking and being able to better understand what's going on in an argument situation.